I never really knew my grandmother. Her name was Eleanor Mayfield, and she lived alone in a decrepit Victorian house at the edge of town. My father never spoke about her much, and my mother downright avoided the topic. She was the kind of old woman people whispered about, reclusive, strange, always muttering to herself about things no one else could see. When she passed away, the house was left to me. I should have sold it. I should have burned it to the ground. But something about it felt unfinished. I was at a point in my life where I needed a fresh start, and the idea of having a place all to myself, free and clear, was tempting. Besides, I wasn't superstitious. It was just an old house. Or so I thought. Moving in. The first time I stepped inside, the air felt wrong. Not cold, exactly, but dense, like stepping into a place that had been sealed off for too long. Dust hung in the air, catching the light that barely filtered through the thick curtains. The wooden floors creaked under my weight, like the house was adjusting to me. Everything was just left there. Her coat still hung on a rusted hook by the door. A half-empty teacup sat on the kitchen counter, its contents long since dried to a black, crusted stain. A pair of old slippers waited at the foot of a high-backed chair in the sitting room, as if she had just stepped out of them. It felt less like moving into a house and more like walking into someone else's life, frozen in time. I spent the first day clearing out some of the clutter, dusting off furniture, and opening windows to let the stale air escape. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I'd turn quickly, expecting to see someone standing in the doorway. Nothing. I'd catch movement from the corner of my eye, a shifting shadow, a flicker of something beyond the window. Nothing. I told myself it was just nerves. First nights in unfamiliar places always feel strange. I was just psyching myself out. By nightfall, I was exhausted. I dragged an old mattress into what used to be my grandmother's bedroom, it was the least unsettling room in the house, and collapsed onto it. I tried to sleep. I really tried. But then, at exactly 12:14 a.m., I heard it. The first sound. At first, it was faint. A low, almost imperceptible grinding noise. It came from downstairs. My eyes snapped open, my body instantly rigid with tension. My heart hammered in my chest as I strained to listen. The noise was deep, mechanical, like something heavy dragging slowly across the floor. It stopped. A long silence followed. Then. Creak. A single, deliberate footstep on the floor below me. I froze. Another creak. Slow. Unhurried. Like someone was walking across the room. I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry, my breath shallow. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but my fingers trembled too much to grip it properly. I clutched the blankets instead, my body completely still, every nerve in my body screaming at me to listen. The footsteps stopped. I waited. Minutes passed. Nothing. Finally, I exhaled. It's an old house. Houses settle. The wood shifts. The pipes groan. I was being paranoid. I turned over, willing myself to sleep. But just as I started to drift off. Creak. My eyes shot open. The noise was directly below me. And this time, it wasn't just a footstep. It was breathing. A low, raspy inhale. Exhale. Right beneath my bed. I didn't move. I couldn't. I lay there, completely still, my breath locked in my throat. The sound was unmistakable, low, rattling, like someone with failing lungs struggling to breathe. It came from beneath the floorboards. Right below my bed. The inhale was deep, dragging in the cold air of the house. The exhale was worse, slow and ragged, like something wet and decayed was trying to sigh. I squeezed my eyes shut. This isn't happening. This isn't real. Then. Thump. A single, dull impact beneath me. My heart nearly stopped. I wanted to believe it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or a stray cat that had somehow gotten into the crawlspace. But no animal breathes like that. And no animal knocks. I forced myself to move, reaching for my phone on the nightstand with a shaking hand. The dim light from the screen illuminated the room, but I didn't dare turn on the flashlight. I didn't want to see. I opened the voice recorder app and hit record, setting the phone beside me. If I was losing my mind, I needed proof. For minutes, there was silence. Then, scratch. A sound like brittle fingernails scraping along the wood. My stomach twisted. I need to leave. I slowly sat up, trying not to make a sound. The air felt thick, charged. Like the house itself was pressing in on me. Then, just as my feet touched the cold wooden floor. Bang! A violent, earth-shaking slam against the floor beneath me. I bolted upright, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My phone nearly slipped from my hands as I clutched it. What the hell was that? The silence that followed was unbearable. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. But something was there. Watching. Waiting. The empty house wasn't empty. I barely slept. Every little noise, the wind outside, the settling of the house, sent waves of dread through me. The feeling of being watched never left. By morning, I was exhausted. The whole night felt like a hallucination, a waking nightmare that refused to let me go. I checked the recording on my phone. Most of it was quiet. Just the occasional creak, the sound of me shifting in bed. Then, at 12:14 a.m., the low, mechanical grinding noise started. At 12:16 a.m., the first creak of footsteps. At 12:18 a.m., the breathing. It was real. My stomach churned as I listened to it again. The inhale, deep and slow. The exhale, too long, too unnatural. I could hear my own shaky breaths overlapping with it, proving I hadn't imagined it. Then came the scraping. And finally, the bang. I had no explanation. I had no idea what the hell was happening in this house. But I had proof. The second night, I considered leaving. I really did. But some stupid part of me needed to know. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was pride. Maybe I just refused to let a goddamn house scare me out of a free place to live. So I stayed. But this time, I prepared. I found an old cassette recorder in one of my grandmother's drawers. It was ancient but still worked, with a fresh tape loaded inside. I set it up in the hallway outside my bedroom and pressed record. Then, I turned on my phone's voice recorder again and set it on the nightstand. If something happened tonight, I was going to catch it. Midnight. I laid there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. The house felt different tonight. Heavier. Like it was aware of what I was doing. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, at 12:14 a.m., I heard it again. That same deep, mechanical grinding from somewhere below. I sucked in a breath, forcing myself to stay still. It's happening again. The sound stopped. Then. Creak. A footstep. This time, it wasn't downstairs. It was in the hallway. Right where I had set the recorder. I clenched my jaw, my whole body tense. My ears strained in the silence. Then. Another step. And another. They were slow, deliberate, stopping right outside my bedroom door. I barely breathed. The air was so thick, so heavy. Then came the worst part. Click. The soft, unmistakable sound of my doorknob turning. I launched forward and flipped on the lamp. The room was empty. The door was closed. The hallway outside was silent. But I knew what I heard. And when I checked the recorder in the morning, I would know for sure that I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in bed, staring at the door, waiting for something, anything, to happen again. My body was stiff, my muscles tense, like I was bracing for an impact that never came. But the house didn't make a sound. It was worse than the night before. At least then, I knew something was there. Now, it was as if the house was waiting. Watching. Sometime around 4 a.m., exhaustion got the best of me. My eyes burned, my head felt heavy. I let myself sink into the mattress, gripping my phone in my hand. Just rest for a bit. Just a few minutes. I must have drifted off. Because when I woke up, the sun was rising. And the bedroom door was open. The recordings. The moment I saw the door, my stomach dropped. I didn't leave it open. I was sure of it. I checked my phone first. The voice recorder was still running. My hands were shaking as I stopped the recording and hit play. For the first hour or so, it was just silence. Then, around 3:27 a.m., the noises started. That low grinding sound again, deep, mechanical, like something shifting inside the walls. Then the soft creaks of footsteps. Not from the hallway. From inside my room. I felt sick. The steps were slow, deliberate. They moved toward my bed. I heard myself breathing, soft, shallow. I must have been half asleep. Then. A whisper. A single word, too garbled to understand. Then. The sound of the door clicking open. I slammed my phone down, my pulse hammering in my ears. Someone was in the room with me. I didn't want to listen anymore. But I had to. I played the last few seconds. After the whisper and the door opening, the recording ended with something else. A breath. Right next to the microphone. Right next to me. I shot out of bed, feeling violated, exposed. I needed to get out. The kitchen incident. I ran downstairs. The air felt wrong. Heavier. Thicker. The entire house was stagnant, like it had been holding its breath all night. The kitchen was exactly how I left it, except for one thing. All the cabinets were open. Every single one. I stopped in the doorway, my mind racing. The doors weren't just ajar. They were wide open, perfectly aligned. A metallic taste filled my mouth. I hadn't touched them. A deep, rational part of me tried to explain it away. Maybe the old hinges loosened. Maybe it was a draft. Maybe. Slam. I jumped back. The cabinet under the sink had just slammed shut. Right in front of me. My skin prickled with cold, but I forced myself forward. I grabbed the handle and yanked the door open. Nothing. Then. The light above me flickered. I backed away, my pulse pounding. Something about this moment felt too real, too immediate. The air shifted, like something was right there with me. I took a slow step back. Then, behind me. A metallic clatter. I spun around. The knife from the counter had fallen. I didn't touch it. I wasn't anywhere near it. It fell on its own. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I was being watched. Then came the final sign. A sound so quiet I almost missed it. From the empty hallway behind me. A soft, deliberate shuffle. I ran. Leaving wasn't an option. I bolted out of the kitchen, grabbed my car keys, and yanked open the front door. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to get out. The moment I stepped outside, I stopped. A thick blanket of fog covered everything. The temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees overnight. The air was sharp and freezing, my breath coming out in pale clouds. My car was parked just a few steps away. I took one step forward. And the porch light went out. All the lights in the house went out. I stood there, frozen, as the darkness swallowed everything. The fog felt like it was pressing in. Then, from inside the house, a single knock on the wall. Not from the front door. From the inside of the living room. Right next to me. I couldn't see anything past the doorway, just pure blackness. But I knew. Something was in there. Standing in the dark. Waiting for me to come back inside. I didn't move. The house loomed behind me, its silhouette swallowed by the thick fog. That knock, deliberate, slow, still echoed in my ears. I gripped my car keys so hard they cut into my palm. My gut screamed at me to run, to get the hell out. But where? The nearest motel was nearly an hour away, and the road leading out of town was pitch black, barely visible through the mist. The cold bit through my skin, sharp and merciless. My breath trembled in the freezing air. Then, a sound from inside the house. Soft at first. A faint, dragging noise. Then, thump. Something hit the floor inside. Hard. My body went rigid. It came from the living room. Another thump. Closer this time. I took a shaky step back onto the porch. My fingers hovered over my car's unlock button, but I hesitated. If my car wouldn't start, I'd be trapped outside, exposed. At least in the house, I could lock a door. A horrifying thought crept into my head: what if something was already outside? Watching me? The air felt charged. Like something was waiting for me to make a choice. I took a deep breath, then made the worst decision of my life. I went back inside. The living room incident. The air inside was different. Heavy. Dense. Like walking through thick, unseen cobwebs. I forced myself toward the living room. My shoes creaked against the wooden floor, every step sending a nervous jolt through my body. The room was still. Nothing looked out of place. But that feeling was stronger than ever, like someone was standing just out of sight. Then I saw it. The armchair. My grandmother's old recliner. It was turned slightly, facing me. It hadn't been like that before. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. The air around the chair felt wrong. The temperature dropped noticeably. Then, the old lamp beside it flickered. Once. Twice. Then it shut off completely. Darkness swallowed the room. I backed away, my breath quickening. My foot bumped into something. A soft rustling sound. I looked down. The wedding dress. The same one that had fallen out of the closet days ago. It wasn't there before. Then, a scrape behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering. The recliner was now fully turned toward me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The silence was unbearable. Then, from the darkness, a whisper. Right next to my ear. Leave. I ran. The attack. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the bedroom door behind me. My hands shook as I locked it. Something was in the house with me. Something real. Something that wanted me gone. The room was suffocatingly quiet. Then. Knock. Knock. I clamped a hand over my mouth, stifling a gasp. The knocking wasn't on the door. It was coming from inside the walls. A rhythmic, scraping knock, like something was trying to dig its way through. Then it started moving. The knocking traveled along the wall, toward the bed. Closer. Closer. I leaped off the mattress just as the bed shook violently, the wooden frame scraping across the floor. I pressed myself against the door, my pulse slamming against my ribs. Then, the worst thing happened. The blanket on the bed lifted. Not from the wind. Not from my movement. It lifted as if something was crawling underneath it. I grabbed my phone, fumbling with the voice recorder. If I was going to survive this, I needed proof. I hit record. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then, a deep, shuddering breath. Not mine. From inside the room. Then, before I could react, something grabbed my ankle. I screamed. I kicked violently, trying to wrench my leg free from whatever had grabbed me. The grip wasn't solid. It wasn't like a hand, but more like a freezing pressure, tightening around my ankle like something invisible was pressing down hard. Then, it yanked. I hit the floor hard, my spine slamming against the wood. My breath left me in a sharp gasp. I scrambled back, kicking at nothing, because there was nothing there. But I felt it. That freezing pressure, dragging me toward the darkness under the bed. I couldn't see it. But it was there. I grabbed onto the leg of the nightstand, trying to pull myself away. The lamp wobbled violently, the glass rattling against the wood. Then, the lamp crashed to the floor. At the same time, the grip released. I scrambled to my feet, panting, my pulse hammering against my skull. My ankle burned with cold, like it had been wrapped in ice. My voice recorder was still running. I snatched my phone off the floor and hit stop, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped it. The room was dead silent. Then, the whisper. This time, right behind me. Not yours. The chase begins. I bolted for the door. I barely got my fingers around the knob when. Slam. The door shook violently, as if something on the other side had just thrown its entire weight against it. I stumbled back, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My heart pounded so hard it felt like my ribs would snap. Something was outside the room. No. Something was everywhere. A loud scraping sound ripped through the air, like fingernails dragging across wood. It started at the door. Then moved along the walls. Something was circling me. Trapping me. The closet door, slightly ajar, creaked open wider. Darkness spilled out from the gap. Then, a rustling sound. Like fabric moving. I stared, frozen, as something shifted inside the closet. Then I saw it. A glimpse. The dress. Grandma's old wedding dress, hanging on the rack. But something was off. It was swaying. No, not swaying. Something was inside it. Standing in it. I choked on a scream as the dress moved. Then, it stepped forward. The escape. I lunged for the window, yanking it open with trembling hands. The wind outside howled, whipping icy air into the room. The closet creaked. I didn't dare look back. I climbed onto the windowsill, gripping the frame. The drop wasn't far. Just a few feet onto the porch roof. If I could get outside, get to my car. Then, the bedroom lights cut out. Total darkness swallowed me. Except for one thing. A cold breath against the back of my neck. I jumped. The moment my feet hit the porch roof, I heard it. A scream from inside the room. Not human. Not an animal. Something twisted, stretched, filled with rage. The window behind me slammed shut. I ran. I didn't stop. Not when I jumped from the porch to the ground. Not when I sprinted through the freezing air to my car. I fumbled with the keys, throwing myself into the driver's seat. My hands were numb with fear. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. I didn't look back as I peeled out of the driveway. But as I sped down the road, I caught something in the rearview mirror. The house. And in the upstairs window. A dark figure. Watching me. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away, parked under the flickering glow of a gas station light. My hands were still shaking as I cut the engine. My throat was dry, and my entire body felt like it had been wrung out. I needed to hear it. The recording. My phone was still clutched in my hand, the voice recorder app open. The file was there, 4:37 a.m. That was when I'd started it, just before I went to sleep. I put in my earbuds. Pressed play. For the first few minutes, it was just silence. Then my own breathing. The sound of the blankets shifting as I rolled over. Then, footsteps. I gripped the phone tighter. I hadn't been awake for this. The steps were slow, deliberate, moving across the floor. The wood creaked under the weight of something. Something that shouldn't have been there. Then, a whisper. Too quiet to understand. I scrubbed back, turned the volume all the way up. Played it again. The whisper was breathy, right next to the mic. Mine. My stomach twisted. Then I heard something else. A rustling noise. Like fabric moving. My mind flashed back to the closet. The dress. It had been moving. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep listening. A minute passed. Then two. Just more creaks, more whispering, too soft to make out. Then, the bed shifted. The sound of the blankets being yanked. And then, me. Gasping. Thrashing. The moment I'd been dragged out of bed. I remembered it clear as day, but I'd never heard what came before. I'd never heard what was in the room with me before it grabbed my leg. I let the recording play. My own gasping breath filled the speakers, the sound of me scrambling on the floor, the lamp smashing to the ground. Then silence. A pause. And then, right before I shut the recording off. A voice. Crystal clear. And it wasn't mine. I warned you. The house calls me back. I ripped out my earbuds and dropped my phone like it had burned me. My entire body was covered in a cold sweat. The voice. It was so close to the mic. Like someone had leaned over my phone while I lay there, struggling to breathe, and whispered right into it. I gripped the steering wheel, staring out at the empty parking lot. I should have kept driving. I should have left the house behind, never looked back. But something was gnawing at me. A pull. The same feeling I'd had when I first walked through the front door. The same feeling I'd had when I picked up that damn wedding dress. It wasn't finished with me. And I knew, deep down, I wasn't finished with it. I had to go back. Not for the house. Not for Grandma. But for whatever the hell had spoken into my phone. I needed to see it. I needed to know what it wanted. The return. The storm had finally let up when I pulled back into the driveway. The house loomed in front of me, silent, waiting. The upstairs window was dark. Nothing watched me this time. Or, at least, nothing that I could see. I swallowed my fear and stepped out of the car. The cold hit me instantly, but I barely felt it. My hands were numb for a different reason now. I reached the porch. Put my hand on the doorknob. It wasn't locked. I stepped inside. The air was heavy. The kind of stillness that presses against your chest, makes every breath feel like a struggle. I walked slowly, my footsteps echoing on the wood. The lamp was still shattered on the floor. The blankets I had pulled off the bed were still in a pile. Nothing had moved. I let out a slow breath. Then, a creak. From upstairs. I looked up at the ceiling, my pulse hammering. Then another. The sound of slow, careful footsteps. I knew exactly where they were coming from. The bedroom. I should have turned around. I should have left. Instead, I moved forward. I started up the stairs. Step by step, the house seemed to close in around me. The whispers were waiting for me. I knew this time I was going to see it. Each step up the stairs felt heavier than the last, like something didn't want me there. The air pressed against my chest, thick and wrong. My breath came out in short, shallow bursts, but I kept moving. The footsteps above me had stopped. It was waiting. I reached the top of the stairs. The hallway stretched before me, lined with closed doors. The house was dead silent. Except the bedroom door was open. Just slightly. Enough for me to see inside. The air was ice cold. I stepped forward. The door creaked as I nudged it open. The room was the same as I'd left it, the scattered blankets, the broken lamp, except for one thing. The wedding dress. It was no longer in the closet. It was standing upright in the middle of the room, as if someone was wearing it. The sleeves hung limply, the skirt swayed slightly, though there was no breeze. The veil was draped over the invisible face, the whole thing unmoving but so wrong. I swallowed hard. My hand was shaking as I lifted my phone. I needed to record this. I pressed record on the voice memo app and raised the phone. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice barely came out. The dress didn't move. Then a whisper. "Close." Right in my ear. "You know me." My entire body locked up. The whisper wasn't coming from the dress. It was right behind me. A hand grabbed my wrist. Cold. Bone-deep cold. I whipped around. And saw her. A figure, standing just inches away. A woman. Her face was wrong, blurred, shifting like a smudged painting. Her mouth twisted in a way that didn't make sense, her lips forming silent words that never came out. Her eyes. Black pits, bottomless. I couldn't move. She leaned in, her mouth opening, her breath brushing against my cheek. "You shouldn't have come back." Then the room exploded. The closet doors slammed open. The dresser drawers flew out, smashing against the walls. My phone died in my hand. The dress collapsed to the floor. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran. I tore down the stairs, nearly slipping as the floor shook beneath me. The whispers were everywhere now, rising in a cacophony of hissing, breathy voices. I hit the front door and yanked it open. But something grabbed my ankle. Cold, bony fingers wrapped around me, yanking me back. I screamed. Kicked. And then it let go. I stumbled forward, crashing onto the porch. I turned back. The door slammed shut. The entire house fell silent. The storm had completely stopped. The world outside was normal. Except for me. I was gasping, trembling, covered in a cold sweat. And I knew I could never step foot in that house again. Epilogue, the last recording. I never went back. I sold the house the next week, barely got anything for it, but I didn't care. I left. I moved across the country. But some nights I hear her. Not in my house, not in my room. In my recordings. Every now and then, when I play back a voicemail or an old video, there's a whisper. Under my voice. Right before the recording ends. Mine.